Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And good morning, and thank you for watching All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We start today by talking law enforcement right here in Indiana, and a rare day at the Indiana State House. Tuesday, the House of Representatives unanimously passing a bill to improve police accountability here in Indiana. The House broke out into applause when the vote ended. Among the provisions, an emphasis on de-escalation training, new limits on the use of chokeholds, and criminal penalties for intentionally turning off body cameras to hide evidence of misconduct. And let's welcome in Representative Greg Steuerwald. Representative, thank you so much for taking some time. So you authored House Bill 1006. Why is the bill important right now?
Well, I'm in contact with law enforcement on a number of different issues, and talking with the Sheriff's Association on jail overcrowding. And there was, some of all the combination of all the events that happened last summer. That conversation kind of moved into what the General Assembly can do to assist law enforcement to enhance their ability to protect the public. And that conversation there grew into all of law enforcement. We got the state police, the chiefs of police, the FOP, and those conversations led to three general categories that they thought we could assist them. And one is, they said everything begins with training, Greg. That's where you start. The best training produces the best officers. And they said, we already do de-escalation training, both on the field and in the classroom, but they said they supported go ahead and put that in statute, which we did.
Right.
And then they said, the second category we need is car and body cams. That was a big part of the bill, but that's going to be in the budget now. We did an informal survey, and most sheriff's departments already have car and body cams, and most city police officer or city departments and towns. But we're going to have a budget or a grant program in the budget for those local units of government which do not currently have car and body cams, that they can apply for those grants.
The bill really does emphasize de-escalation training. Why is that such a focus, in your opinion?
Well, because of the all the unrest and things was a major part of the discussion with law enforcement, and along with all the different departments, we also included the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, who's in charge of the training. And when I brought that subject up, they said, look, we already do that, but it's not uncommon for us to go ahead and put what's in practice into a statute. So we went ahead and did that. But they do that, and they do a very good job of that.
The bill would make it a crime for an officer to intentionally turn off a body camera. Why is that the message that you wanted to be a part of this bill? And did you get any pushback from specifically the law enforcement community when you added that in?
There was absolutely no pushback from law enforcement on anything in this bill. They were in total agreement and total support. This rogue or wandering officer, and everybody in law enforcement wanted to eliminate that person. So we took a look at the decertification process. That's where they're licensed to be a law enforcement officer in Indiana by, again, the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy.
What you're saying is that this will help get rid of a bad officer, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There was consensus among all law enforcement that they said, look, we have some rogue or wandering officers who are making it bad on all of us. And so they supported making a little more ability to decertify an officer. And the important part there is, up until now, an officer is being disciplined, he would just resign and walk away and say, drop your action, I'll quit. Well, now under the 1006, that process continues even if he resigns. And that process continues, and the recommendation is sent to ILEA to decertify the officer, even though he might resign.
Representative Greg Steuerwald, thank you very much for taking some time, sir. We'll talk soon. Good luck.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Have a good one. Also this week, a call for reform for police officers here in Indianapolis. The Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, a group of leaders from the public and private sector, issuing their report on how to reform IMPD. The report has been months in the making. It includes calls for increased civilian oversight, changes to police misconduct investigations, and possibly ending police qualified immunity. The group calls the report a, quote, starting point to the essential and controversial conversations surrounding community policing in Indiana. John Gaydu was one of the authors of the report for the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. And good to see you, John. Thank you for taking some time. So one of what the report calls a critical initiative is increased civilian oversight on IMPD. Explain what type of oversight that you would like to see, if you can.
Right. So the type of oversight that we want to see is civilians being able to be engaged at a meaningful level in the policies that dictate how policing is conducted in Indianapolis. So, for example, if in the General Orders Board, if civilians are able to participate, and especially with a 4-3 majority civilian split, it just ensures that civilians have this voice and can actually meaningfully affect the way that they're interacting with police, with the hope that at the end of the day, the relationship between the police and the communities they serve will improve. You have to have a two-way conversation, and this is one of the ways that you can sort of bake that into the process.
And you also, I understand, want changes in the review and disciplinary process. Should all disciplinary case results be public?
So I wouldn't say all should be public. There could be compelling reasons that you would not be able to provide information to the public. But what we're talking about when we talk about increasing public access to records is really just, unless there's a compelling reason, erring on the side of giving people more information. Because again, transparency breeds trust, which breeds better relationships between the public and the police.
Yeah, fair enough. We hear that quite often. The report also calls for emphasis on de-escalation training. It's also a key in the bill that was just passed in the Indiana House that I'm sure you're aware of. Your thoughts?
I thought HB 1006 was a good step in the right direction. There are some really good things in that bill. You know, the chokehold section of the bill, I wish it would have gone a little further and maybe defined chokehold broader. However, I do like to focus on the positive as well. There are many great things and good reforms that we support and have been looking for that are contained in the bill. And I think equally importantly, it was a bipartisan effort. And I think that hopefully going forward, we can see more bipartisan effort. Conversations happening that are going to really give us the progress we need to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, something we haven't heard for a while, bipartisanship, right? It's a good thing. You also suggest ending qualified immunity for law enforcement officers. It's kind of a controversial position. Why is it so important for the folks at home that maybe don't understand?
Right. So we want people to consider ending qualified immunity. And the reason is that although the intent may have been good, the way that it operates, it has created a very high bar to establish to be able to hold bad actors accountable. So we recognize and we appreciate the majority of police that go out there and they do a very hard job. They risk their lives. We fully appreciate that. We also know that just as in with any other group of people, there are bad actors. And to the extent that happens, we don't want to have a standard set so high that we're not able to hold them to account for the things that they're doing that are inconsistent with what I think most good police would expect.
One other section that really jumped out was the creating of new guidelines for when officers would have to intervene and report conduct by fellow officers. Not an easy thing to do when you talk to cops out on the streets. Do you think it's possible, and why is it so important to you guys?
Right. Well, this is important because to the extent there are bad actors, and we've seen examples of bad actors, we want the good police, the majority of police, we want them to feel comfortable that they can raise those issues, bring it to the attention of the right people, and we can do something about it. And so what we want to see in that area is we want to see real clarity. We want police to be able to know exactly what they can do, how they can report it. And most importantly, we want them to rest assured that if they do report bad conduct on the part of a colleague, that there will be accountability and they won't be retaliated against. And so we think it's so important to spell that out as clearly as possible so that we can have people comfortable in doing the right thing.
John, I have one more question for you. And again, I thank you for taking some time. I know you're very busy. What chance do you believe that this actually has a chance of passing here in Indianapolis this year?
Well, I'm going to be optimistic. I think seeing the bipartisan support that this got in the House, I don't see any reason why the Senate can't act quickly and make this thing a reality. I think so. So I'm not going to be pessimistic. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to hope that people do the right thing. They put partisanship aside and they think about the community and the police. And I think this is going to benefit both parties.
That's an important topic. John Gaydu, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
Coming up, the bill that would change the protections for Indiana's wetlands and why it's drawing so much attention. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Let's turn our attention now to Indiana's Senate. This week, senators passed a bill that essentially eliminates the state's regulation of what are known as isolated wetlands. Those are wetlands not covered under federal rules. Supporters of the bill say it ends unnecessary restrictions on farmers and home builders. Critics say it threatens Indiana's drinking water. Our Alexis Rogers is with one of those critics, State Senator Shelley Yoder.
State Senator Shelley Yoder is with me now. And you know what? This bill, you decided to oppose it. Talk to me and talk me through a little bit why you opposed this bill.
Indiana used to be covered with wetlands, and over time and through development and farming, some of those have been filled up, and we've lost about 85% of all of Indiana's wetlands. And so of that 15% that's remaining, 80% is regulated, called isolated wetlands, by Indiana, and the other is regulated federally. And this bill deregulates all the wetlands that are currently being protected by Indiana statute. And what's really dangerous about that is our wetlands, those isolated wetlands, you might see them as, what is the point? Huge. Whether it's clean drinking water, whether it's soaking up water from flooding and rains, whether some people see them as, they definitely are beautiful, but they serve a very important purpose in the ecosystem and in our fresh drinking water, clean drinking water for the state of Indiana.
A lot of supporters of this bill feel like it puts a lot of restraint on farmers, and specifically that IDM has gotten too big or too powerful. What's your thoughts about that?
I think we certainly don't want to be harming farming. We don't want to necessarily do that, but this bill actually could provide some protections for farmers in that wetlands help soak up that water, that flooding. And we have seen some major flooding when we're talking about the climate crisis. Now is the time we should be looking for ways that we can mitigate and adjust to that climate crisis. And our isolated and our wetlands, all the wetlands, serve a very critical purpose in that role. And so while we don't want to unnecessarily harm our farmers, that is not the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And if there are issues, and what I'm hearing, there are isolated cases where there are issues, that should definitely be addressed. But what this legislation does is it takes a chainsaw to something that should be a scalpel, just figuring out what are the problems when it comes to maybe there's something that's happening personality-wise, or landowners don't feel like they have a say in the process. We should definitely be able to work with our legislators, with government, to find a workable solution for all Hoosiers.
You talked a little bit about what this means for the environment. What's the kitchen table conversation about what this means to families out there?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because the very next day in the state legislature, we passed a bill to create a wastewater task force. And that wastewater task force is going to be charged with looking at how are we going to address the quality of drinking water in the state of Indiana? How are we going to address our wastewater problem? The day before, we just did away with nature's way of addressing wastewater, which is the wetlands. It cleans our water. It captures that water. It filtrates that water. And it's just ironic that one day, the same people who voted to deregulate our wetlands voted to support creating a task force to look at the problem of our wastewater. Those two things do not go together. Wetlands protects the water we drink. It helps us deal with flooding, and it's an important piece of the ecosystem in Indiana.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Coming up, the Democrats vote Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene out of her House committees. Our political experts talk. That's coming up next on All Indiana. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday morning as we welcome back in Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Drew Anderson. Good to see you both. Thank you for taking some time on this Sunday. Let's start with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, guys. She's been removed from her committees. Whitley, your thoughts? She's in your party.
I really didn't know much about her until all of this news kind of kicked up. While I don't agree with any of the comments she made, I'm more about council culture than cancel culture. Specifically with the Democratic Party, if we look at some of the things that their leaders have said, the anti-Semitic things that Representative Ilhan Omar has said, the things that Hillary Clinton has said, and President Biden, specifically about not wanting to desegregate schools because he didn't want his kids being in a racial jungle. I think that setting this precedent is going to be tricky because what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander.
Go ahead, Drew. I know you want to jump in here.
Here's the thing. To Whitley's point, Democrats have always held Democrats accountable, regardless of their past mistakes. And when it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, she has endorsed the idea to execute politicians. And what's worse, in Indiana, not even in Indiana, in general, she has said that recent school shootings are a hoax. And in Indiana, in Noblesville, Hoosiers in Noblesville, they'll be offended by that. And I think what's worse is that Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, she's cozying up to her. And it's a direct disrespect to that community, and she needs to apologize.
She's also had some crazy conspiracy theories about the Parkland shooting and 9/11. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. That said, though, Drew, to Whitley's point, Representative Ilhan Omar, she has said some pretty sensational stuff as well.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Speaker Pelosi and the Democratic Party forced her to apologize for those anti-Semitic remarks. President Joe Biden has been held accountable for his comments on desegregation from decades past.
Your accountability level is different because you're censoring and removing her from committees, but no one did that to Maxine Waters, who encouraged harassment of Trump supporters.
Please let me finish.
It's got to be equal. Equality is important in 2021, and so is
please let me finish.
All right, let's hear from Drew. Go ahead, Drew.
And the thing is that the Indiana Republican Party and the Republican Party overall refuse to hold bad actors accountable. And that's a problem, because how far is this going to go? Because we already had an insurrection against our country, and the Republican Party refuses to hold the president accountable, and they refuse to hold Marjorie Taylor Greene accountable. And that's a problem because it's un-American and it's against our Constitution.
Well, a number of Republicans, though, Drew, have voted to remove her from those committees.
Yeah, and we're celebrating those folks because they stood up to the party and they did the hard thing. It's because they are willing to publicly say that what the actions of Congresswoman Taylor Greene were wrong. And the thing is that Indiana Republicans refuse to do that, and it shows how little character they have.
To your point, Whitley, about precedent, what is your biggest concern when it comes to that?
You know, the truth of the matter is you have to treat people equally. Right. So you see Representative Maxine Waters tell people to harass Trump supporters. Right. Where was that same accountability, and where was removing her from committees? They didn't do that. Right. Because that's Auntie Maxine. And so I think what is going to happen and what we will see happen is that their accountability will only be towards Republicans. And that's the truth. It'll only be when Republicans do things and when Republicans say things, because none of the representatives that you've mentioned or that I've mentioned have even the first step wasn't to remove or censor them from any committees.
Quick response, Drew, and then I want to get to another topic real quick.
I hear you. The Indiana Democratic Party has held our bad actors accountable, and it includes an example from last year when we had someone within our party that was connected to white supremacist organizations, and we asked that person to step down. The Republicans won't do it.
We censored Jim Lucas for the first time.
All right. Real quick, guys. I'm running out of time. Less than a minute left. You're both looking for new leaders for both of your respective parties. Front runners on either side. Drew, we'll start with you real quick.
Oh, I think our two candidates are great. Trish Wickham is the announced candidate. There is a rumored candidate with Mike Schmoll. Both are going to be perfect for the party because the Indiana Democratic Party is about the U.S. Constitution, American democracy, and that can't be said for the other side.
Whitley, 15 seconds.
We're not looking for new leadership because we have the best leadership in Chairman Hupfer. He will be chairman until he chooses not to, with every state office, both Senate houses, 7 out of 9 congressional districts, 71 mayor's office, and 88% of all elected offices. We are on a roll and we'll stay on a roll.
I didn't realize he was keeping the same job. Thank you very much. Good to see you both. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be right back.
Take care.
And thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. Remember, the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump begins this week. We'll have full coverage for you. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.